Hi and welcome back. My name is JP, and in today's difficult conversations, I'm joined by Skedge, a good friend of mine who's a serving police officer, who we're going to have a conversation and be having some different points of view. Hopefully you guys find this interesting. So, Skedge, thank you for having me.
No problem at all.
Nice to spend some time again. So, Skedge, serving police officer. To give people a little bit of background, kind of be happy you're talking about your role and how many years experience you have.
Yeah, so I've been a police officer within Devon and Cornwall Police for the last 25 years. Predominantly based in Exeter and the locality. I did a couple of years initially down in Cornwall, but for most of my service up in Exeter, a variety of different roles, response, neighbourhood policing, on a training unit, and also working with prolific offenders. So a variety of different frontline roles. And obviously this is just an opportunity for you and I just to have a natter. But I'll kind of do the government health warning that these are just my observations. All right, I'm not obviously not speaking on behalf of Devon and Cornwall Police.
Sure.
Albeit I'm more than happy to say I'm a serving officer and
Sure.
so on and so forth. So whatever we talk about, they're just my observations or thoughts.
Great. No, thank you for that.
That's right.
So the reason I'm grateful for you having this chat with me, when you reached out to me after my first two videos, was I thought how great and useful it would be for people to hear the thoughts and opinions on current affairs in the world by someone who is a serving officer. So first question, let's get straight to the point. Is there an issue of institutional racism within police in the UK?
Let's go for it. I would imagine that there are many different processes and different structures that we've got within Western society, which are built on unconscious bias or built on processes which have existed, and undoubtedly, therefore, there will be some bits within policing which is institutionally racist or has got that kind of subliminal stuff. So not overt, it's not that the officers themselves are specifically racist, it's not the fact that those structures are specifically racist. But there are going to be things which happen which could disadvantage people of colour.
Sure.
Or would be advantageous to people who are white.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think it's a difficult one, and I think when the term institutional racism was first used following the investigation around Stephen Lawrence's murder, I don't think lots of society kind of understood what that meant. I don't think lots of cops understood what it meant. It was a kind of an intellectual highbrow type of comment in a strategic overview of what had occurred, and it was more of a word that was used in academia and that sort of stuff. And I remember at the time feeling quite disappointed that I felt that I'd been told by this person who I didn't know that I was racist.
Sure.
And I know that a colleague kind of felt the same because there wasn't the clarity of understanding about what that kind of concept meant. I think since that report from MacPherson, and we've kind of moved on, I think people have understood better what that narrative is about.
Sure.
And I think in the same way that some people get really misunderstand the concept around Black Lives Matter, and will use other hashtags instead, like All Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter or whatever. there's a lack of understanding, because obviously all lives are important. Yes, we get that.
Yeah.
But actually, it's that lack of understanding about what the whole BLM stuff is about, in its purest form. Not some of the other political stuff that goes around it, but in the purest form, in the non-violent protests, to challenge those things, then I think there has been a lack of understanding. And that, I think that's always part of the problem, though, isn't it? That when we use language, it's really powerful, but it's only really powerful if we've got shared understanding, and if we actually really understand what we're actually talking about. So to go back to your original question about institutional processes, yes, there will be stuff, and I mean, I know you've only got to look at the number of FTSE companies who've got chief execs who are people of colour, or governing bodies in schools, or makeup of councils, or whatever it is, to know that there are so many areas where people of colour are underrepresented, that it's not surprising that policing is one of those as well. I think there's been huge, I was going to say improvement, there's been some improvement. I don't think it's as big as it should have been, but for some reason, within British society, whenever we talk about trying to increase recruitment and we make reference to ethnicity, there's a backlash.
Sure.
But if we say that we want to close the gender pay gap, or we want to increase the representation of females, there's no kickback.
That's interesting, that. Yeah.
And that's my take.
Yeah.
That actually, we've talked for years about trying to increase our representation of BAME within policing. And yet we still struggle to do so.
Sure. That's interesting you're saying that. Like, I had a different friend who also serves in the police, who said to me a few years ago, JP, you should apply to be in the police. I go, why? He goes, you should apply to be a police right now, because it'll be so much easier for you to get in. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, obviously, as you're a different colour, JP, it's going to be a whole lot easier for you than for me. Him being he is a white friend, to get into the police. And I was in two minds. One mind, so I thought, okay, I'm being positively discriminated against to get into a certain career, which maybe, okay, cool, that's going to help me get somewhere possibly where I want to go. If that is a career choice I'm thinking of going into, it's going to be easier for me to get into, so I can have a positive impact in the society I'm serving if I become a policeman in Devon and Cornwall. But in the same breath, I was also a little bit saddened by the fact that if I was applying for a job against a white candidate, I would be looked at preferably solely on my skin colour. And I felt that wasn't right, because I would like to be judged on my merit alone.
I don't know. I mean, I think firstly, I think you'd be a great police officer. But that's
one day, maybe one day.
One day. But that's just because I think you'd be pretty good at everything you do. So that's kind of good. But so I find that fascinating that someone felt that you would have a better chance to get in at the moment, or whenever it was they spoke to you, because one of the other roles I've had for most of the last 15, 16 years is I'm a national recruit assessor. Okay. So I assess people when they come through the process, and there's nothing in that process that has anything to do with colour.
Okay.
I suspect what they were thinking is that we have tried to do some advertising and campaigns specifically targeting some groups and kind of hard to reach groups in society.
Sure.
So we run adverts perhaps in Pink News or whatever, in order to but in order to promote and encourage policing as an option for those people who may read that particular article or that particular magazine. In the same way that we have run and we do run events at universities, or we've run events in mosques, and we've run events in different communities with a view to trying to encourage people who just might not even have it on their radar. So I think there's a number of reasons, and you touched on some of them. I think culturally, some people wouldn't view policing as being something that they would want to do.
Sure.
Possibly because of previous experiences within the family, and the wider community around policing, and just not thinking that it was something they'd be interested in doing. Partly, I think, probably because as a public sector organisation, it's not necessarily brilliantly well paid.
Sure.
Certainly, if you're starting off, the starting salary for a police officer is less than you'll earn if you work in somewhere like Lidl or Aldi.
Okay.
So
it's quite an impact,
Why would you work 24-hour shifts and when you can work different kind of hours in a supermarket?
Sure.
Why would you get spat at and risk of assault and all that sort of stuff when actually you can earn more working in Aldi? When hopefully you won't get spat at and assaulted very often. So I think there's a couple of bits there, but I think it's also I think there are campaigns where we want to make a change. So if we're talking about trying to increase representation, but if I focus on something like the gender pay gap, we've been told that it will, if we carry on at the current rate of kind of trying to close that pay gap, it's going to take decades to close. So unless you do something massive, it's never going to improve, because it'll eventually get there just doesn't work. The challenge around quotas is that you can feel that you're just a quota, and you can feel that me as white man is being unfairly treated because the force are desperately trying to recruit people of colour.
So it turns out that my phone actually stopped recording partway through the conversation between myself and Sketch, which is a shame. So we're going to call this video part 1, and in part 2 we'll be talking about a few topics such as racial profiling, changes to the police service since the MacPherson report in 1997 off the back of the Stephen Lawrence killing in 93. We'll also be talking about unconscious bias in the police as well as society, and of course we'll be talking about stop and search. So until next time, I encourage you to keep challenging yourselves by reading around these topics and be brave to have difficult conversations.